Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Queen & Company's brand new Beach Bound kit. This is a shaker kit and it has lots of fun images. Here's just a quick look at everything that's included in the kit. There's a full 6x6 paper pad, lots of steel dies, enough foam and acetate pieces to make 18 shakers. There's also a fun sentiment stamp set and exclusive shaker toppings. So let's jump right into my first set of cards. I'm using a card sketch from OWH. This is number 169. If you are interested in any of the card sketches I show, I share all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is provided in the description box below. I will be using my 6x6 paper pad tutorial to finish off the entire paper pad. However, I'm only going to show the assembly of one card of each design. With all of the shakers, it takes quite a while to assemble those, so I thought this would be a better way to share this video. In addition to the 6x6 paper pad that's included in the kit, I also picked up the Beach Bound solids. This is an add-on purchase. It has simply solid papers. These aren't cardstock, it's the same paper weight as the pattern paper, but the colors match perfectly with the paper collection. I love having those matching colors, although I do still add some cardstock since I add so many layers to my cards. For this first card, I'm including the little shovel and pail image. So the pail is the shaker. I used the outline dies to cut out that back piece, attach the foam. All of Queen & Company's foam is double-sided with adhesive. You just have to remove the backing. So once I put the foam in place, I can fill up that shaker with some of Queen & Company's shaker toppings. And for this one, I'm using the toppings that are included in the kit. Then I remove the other side of the foam tape backing, seal everything in place with the acetate, and then glue on the little die cut frame. So now I can assemble the rest of the pail and the little shovel. And I'm going to put my little yellow shovel off to the right, putting it underneath that pail just a little bit. I wanted to add a little extra decoration to the pail, so I used one of Queen & Company's scallop border dies to cut out that bottom red scallop and just glued it on top. And then of course adding the handle to the pail. The sentiment, I've already gone ahead and stamped this out just to save on time. This is Enjoy Your Day. I used one of Queen & Company's foundation die sets for this stitch banner. And I'll just pop that up using some foam dimensional tape. And now to finish off the card, I'm using an assortment of Queen & Company bling. For this card, I have some of their pinwheels, some iridescent bubbles, and also some petite posies. Queen & Company sells a huge variety of really fun bling, so definitely go and check that out. So there are the two cards I made using this sketch. And I will have links provided in the description box for all of the products I use in this video. So moving on to the next set of cards, this sketch is from MFT, it's number 490. Now even though I add measurements to the card sketches, and these are all for A2 size cards, I don't always follow those measurements. So this card is an example of me not following those measurements, but instead just using that sketch for inspiration. So I have the water pattern paper for the background, layered it on some cardstock, and then added this stitched rectangle frame. I used some white pearlescent cardstock for that frame just to add a little extra shimmer. Now I'm adding this strip of the craft cardstock to the lower portion of the card. I used one of Queen & Company's border dies to cut out that wavy border on the top. And I used some scrap cardstock pieces to put in the center and then also the outside edges where it goes over that frame, just to keep everything nice and even. And then using that same dark blue cardstock, I cut out this thin strip with a little stitching in the center. This is by Queen & Company. And I used some liquid adhesive to adhere it on top of that craft cardstock. So I'll go ahead and put my card front onto my card base before I start working on the images. So for this card, I'm assembling two of the surfboards. So one of them is going to be a non-shaker and then the other will be a shaker. It's fun to include both, and it's nice that you can still use all of the dies in the kit for non-shaker cards. They have a lot of detail to them, so they still make really fun images. For the yellow surfboard, I used the outline dies to cut out that background piece, and then also the frame dies. And now I'm just adding all the extra little details. So I'm putting some of the solid orange paper, and then also some little strips of the green, which was left over from the green surfboard. And they're pretty tiny pieces, those little stripes that go on the surfboard, so it was helpful to have my tweezers to adhere all of those. Now the green surfboard is going to be the shaker. So again, I used the outline die for that background piece, attached the foam, filled it up with some of the shaker toppings that are included in the kit, seal it all in place with the acetate. I'm adding some liquid adhesive, and I am bouncing back and forth between Queen & Company's sheer glue and also some art glitter glue. Both are great adhesives. I like the Queen & Company sheer glue for attaching the frames to the acetate. The art glitter glue just dries quicker, which is really handy when you're recording a video. So I'm attaching those little slivers of the orange stripes to the green surfboard. And before I adhere either of the surfboards to the card, I'm going to put a scrap of cardstock on the upper portion of the yellow surfboard, and then I'll glue that one in place. Put some liquid adhesive on the back of the green, and then I'll adhere that on top of the yellow surfboard. And I'm just going to put my acrylic block on top to let all of that glue dry for a little bit. Now I'm going to start working on this sentiment. This is Surf and Sun and Summer Fun. I stamped that on some yellow paper. The stitch banner is from one of Queen & Company's foundation die sets. And since this sentiment is going to go over the green surfboard, I need to add some dimension so that it's all at that same level. So I used some of the leftover foam from the inside of the surfboard, just cut small pieces to put underneath that banner and then adhered it in place. I decided I wanted to add a sun in the upper right hand corner. Now there isn't enough room on my card to add that full sun image, but that's okay. I used the smaller of the sun dies and then also the circle for the sun, glued those two together, and then I just held that sun up to that upper right hand corner, flipped over the card and trimmed off the extra. And using some of those pieces I cut off, I decided to add more rays to the sun. So I'm just holding them up and snipping off the ends to see how long each of those pieces needs to be, and then I'll glue those in place. I have two more, one on the very end, and then one on the top. And again, I will flip over the card and trim off the extra. I want to make sure it's still going to fit inside an A2 size envelope. Now just to add a little extra detail to the surfboards, I'm going to attach a flower. So this is a flower die that's included in Queen & Company's foundation die set number 2. It's probably the set I use the most. And now using some bling. This time I'm using some of the sea stones. And these are really pretty, nice and sparkly. I also have some iridescent goosebumps and some jelly gems. So there is the finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. And on the card I made off screen, I accidentally put that wave water paper upside down. Oh well, it still works. So moving on to the next set of cards. This sketch is from Mojo Monday. It's number 543. I'm using 2 of the tone-on-tone pattern papers for the background. So I have the red polka dot paper and the yellow chevron paper. Layering all of this on some red cardstock, and my cardstock layers are generally 1/8 of an inch more than the measurements listed on the card sketch. And just to add a little bit of separation between those 2 pattern papers, I cut out the skinny stitched strip out of some of the yellow solid paper. And I didn't need the full strip since most of it's going to be covered up, so I just cut out the 2 ends and I'm adhering them to the top and the bottom of the card. For that thin strip that goes across the card, I used another foundation die. This has a fun scallop border on the top and bottom and also that stitch detail. Just adhere that piece in place. And I absolutely love this flip-flop pattern paper. I think it's my favorite in the whole paper pad. So I want to make sure to feature that on at least one of my cards. I'm adding this large scallop circle die cut. I put a piece of scrap cardstock on the lower portion of that circle where it goes off of the pattern paper, just trying to keep all of those pieces nice and level. And then the image on my card, this time I'm assembling the swimsuit. I'm using the blue and white polka dot paper, so I have the outline die for that back piece, attached my foam, and I put some liquid adhesive on the back and I adhered it to my card. Next, I'll add in some of the shaker toppings. And for this shaker, I am using some toppings that aren't included in the kit. So I have the blue toppings that are included. I'm adding in some white pops and also some of the blue posies. I thought the flowers inside the swimsuit looked really lovely. Once I have all the shaker toppings in place, I remove the backing on the foam and seal everything with the acetate. Some liquid adhesive along the outside edge and then attach that swimsuit frame. And I will put my acrylic block on top and let that glue set for a little bit. Now I'll start working on the sentiment, and I decided to add the sentiment into the center of the sun. So instead of the circle for the sun, I used an oval die cut. And this sentiment is "Sunshine is my favorite accessory." Thought that was really fun. And I didn't want that sun to cover up too much of that flip-flop paper, so I did trim off the very left-hand side so that sun will be flush all the way to the left. And then I'll add some foam tape to the back side so I can pop up that sun. Just remove the backing and adhere it to my card. I used the 6x6 solids for the two different colors of yellow for the sun, and then also that blue for the scallop strip that goes across the card. It's so nice to have those solids to complement the pattern paper. Now finishing off the card using some more Queen & Company bling. This time I have some of their epoxy dots, some frosties, and also some petite posies. And I did make 2 cards using this sketch. I love all of the bright and cheerful colors in this paper collection. So now moving on to the next set of cards. This time I'm not using a card sketch. I'm going to be creating a little ocean scene. So I have 3 different papers. The blue sky is from the solids. Then I have some of the wave pattern paper. And then I have the craft cardstock just from my stash. I used one of Queen & Company's border dies to cut out this little sandy hillside. So now that I have the background of my scene, I can start working on the image. For this card, I'm going to be assembling this fun sandcastle. This is one of my favorite images in the whole kit. You can't really tell in the video, but the cardstock color I used for the sandcastle is slightly darker than the cardstock for the sand. Since normally you would have wet sand for your sandcastle, it needs to be a little bit darker. I'm using one of the shaker toppings that's included in the kit. It's these teeny tiny little stars, maybe even little shells. And then I'm also including some brown pearlies, and these are left over from one of their fall kits, I believe. And before I added those little stars, I did use some anti-static powder on the inside of the shaker. Since the first time I assembled a card using those, I found out they're very jumpy. So it does help to keep them from sticking to the sides. After attaching the frame, I'm going to put my acrylic block on top to let that glue dry. So I'll start working on some other elements on the card. I'm going to add the sun again, using just the smaller die for the sun, putting the circle in the center. And then I'll adhere this using some liquid adhesive, putting it off to the left-hand side. And the cloud dies are from one of Queen & Company's foundation die sets. So I wanted them going all the way to the edge, so I just trimmed off the very left and the very right-hand side of each of those clouds. I'm going to pop up the cloud on the left using some foam dimension, and then I'll just use some liquid adhesive and glue the cloud on the right directly onto the card. So now that the main part of that sandcastle frame is dry, I can add some of the other pieces. So there's the little door and also the 3 little dies for the windows. Now the window die cuts are very small, so I'm using my embellishment wand to help pick those up. Just put some liquid adhesive down first and then place those tiny, tiny die cut pieces. For the sentiment, I'm going to stamp it directly onto the sand in the lower left-hand corner. And this sentiment is, have a sensational day. Thought that was appropriate for a nice sandy scene. I'm using my mini MISTI just to make sure I get a solid impression. Now I can glue my sandcastle in place. Just use some liquid adhesive for that. I'll put my acrylic block on top while the glue dries. And now time to add some bling. For this card, I'm using some of the iridescent goosebumps. I also have some jelly gems and also an ice flower. So the ice flower I put on the very top of the sandcastle, and then just putting a couple of the jelly gems to add some extra detail to that sandcastle. Next, I'm going to add some of these tiny shells. This is a topping that was included in Queen & Company's Under the Sea kit. You can also purchase the toppings separately, and I love these little shells. I'll put 3 of them in the sand, a couple around the sentiment and 1 off to the right-hand side. And I'm adhering all of these using some small glue dots. I decided to add 1 more shell to the door of the sandcastle. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2. I think this is my favorite card from the whole set, but do let me know which card is your favorite. So moving on to the next set of cards, again, not using a card sketch. I'm using this fun surfboard pattern paper for the background of the card. Now, since this design is very busy, all of the other papers I include on the card will either be a solid color or a tone-on-tone design. I will be covering up the majority of that pattern paper, but you can still see it along those outside edges. So I have some solid yellow paper for that panel in the center, using some craft cardstock for that circle die cut. Put my card front onto a card base. And for the sentiment, I've already stamped this out. This is bliss is sand between your toes and sunshine on your nose. Queen & Company always has such fun sentiments. I'm going to adhere this tone-on-tone striped orange paper to the card, putting some scrap cardstock on the right and left-hand side where it goes over that yellow paper. And then I'll glue my sentiment right on top. I'll adhere that sentiment closer to the top of that orange striped paper. Then I'm going to add 1 of the skinny stitch strips in the solid orange color and just adhere it right underneath. I do have it hanging off the edge, and I'll just use my scissors to trim the extra away. I'll be using the swim trunk image for this card. I have all of the pieces cut out of that green tone-on-tone paper. And since you've already seen me assemble 4 other shakers in this video, I am going to cut out the rest of the basic assembly just to save on time on this video. This swim trunk image does have the 1 additional die, so you can cut out the waistband. So I used some solid green paper for that piece. I'm going to put my acrylic block on top, and the shaker toppings are all from the kit. Since swim trunks generally have a tie in the front, I decided to use some twine and add just a tiny little bow. And then I'll glue that in place using a mini glue dot. I might use a drop of liquid adhesive later just to make sure that tie isn't going to come off. And just for some extra detail on the card, I'm using 2 solid colors of cardstock and putting 2 banners in the upper left-hand corner. The orange banner is slightly longer than the blue one, and I'll overlap them. Just use some liquid adhesive to adhere those in place. And now finishing touches, pulling out some more Queen & Company bling. I'm using some of the green lollies. I think that really brings out the green in the swim trunks. I also have some yellow iridescent bubbles and some blue jelly gems. Just putting them in the lower right hand corner and then some around the image. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Now moving on to the next set of cards. I'm using a card sketch from MFT. This is number 494. I'm using some polka dot paper for the background, and then for the oval I have this fish or mermaid scale pattern in this light green color. I'm going to add a strip of craft cardstock along the back. Adding that solid craft cardstock really helps break up some of that busy pattern paper in the background. I'll layer the two pieces on some green cardstock, and this is some cardstock I have in my craft room. Before I adhere that oval, I'm going to put some scrap cardstock on the upper and lower portion where it goes over that craft cardstock in the background. Everyone usually has some extra pieces of cardstock lying around, so I like to do this so I don't have that noticeable dent or dip. It's not quite as noticeable if you're already using layers, but I think it's just become a habit for me now. So for this card, I'm going to have two different images. I'm going to start with the sun. This will be the shaker. So there's the two different dies to assemble your sun, although you can use just one of them as I've done in previous cards. So I have the larger and the smaller, used a solid yellow for the larger piece and then the yellow polka dot paper for the smaller piece. For the outline die, I used that yellow polka dot paper, adhered my foam. I glued down the sun to my card before I add any of the shaker toppings. I'm using the yellow toppings that are included in the kit and also some yellow diamonds. This is a fairly small shaker, so you don't have to fill it up very much. Now that my sun shaker is all assembled, I can add my surfboard image, and I've already gone ahead and put all of these pieces together just to save on time. So I used just solid papers, and then for those white strips I added some white pearlescent cardstock. I've stamped out the sentiment, "Sending you sunshine." This is a great sentiment. I think I'm going to use that on a lot of cards. Before adhering it down, I'm just putting some scrap cardstock on the pieces that go over the surfboard, and then I'm also going to put some foam dimension. Because there's already a lot of dimension on the card from the shaker images, I like to add extra dimension by popping up that sentiment and then also adding the bling. So moving on to the bling, I'm using some of the orange spirals for a little decoration on the surfboard. Then I have some green glitter globes, some yellow iridescent bubbles, and then also some green jelly gems. So there is the finished card, and I did make two using this sketch. For my next set of cards, I'm using OWH sketch number 192. This is a favorite sketch and I use it all the time. I wanted to make sure to feature more of this darling flip-flop pattern paper. So I'm using it at the bottom of this card with that 1 1/4 inch strip. Although I think I did cut it just a little bit longer so that it wasn't cutting off some of those flip-flops. I also have some yellow chevron paper, using some of the red solid for the strip going across the card, and then I have some of the polka dot blue and white paper. I didn't want to use a full sheet of the yellow chevron paper since I knew most of it was going to be covered up, so I only cut a 3-inch piece. That did leave that little tiny gap, so I just put a piece of scrap cardstock to fill that in so there wouldn't be that little dip on the red paper. I'll adhere my card front onto my card base before I start working on the image. And I'm going to create another tiny beach scene. So this is just on that smaller rectangle piece. I have the same papers that I used on the previous beach scene, just in a smaller version. I adhere the sky down first, and before I attach the water, I do hold up that sand piece so I can make sure to get the placement of the water correct. I'm going to adhere this piece onto the front of the card, trying to get it nice and centered. I will be using another sandcastle. Now, I'm out of the shakers by this point. There are only 3 foam pieces and acetate pieces for each image, but you can still cut your own. So I'm using some of Queen & Company's foam and acetate pack. It is half as thick as the foam that's included in the kits, so you will need to cut out 2 pieces. So using the frame die, I cut out this little foam piece, just did it twice, and since it is self-adhesive, you just remove the backing. So I adhered the first piece in place, and now I'll put the other one right on top, and now it's the correct thickness, so I can still fill it up with shaker toppings and they'll move around. The foam piece that comes with the kit does have that top triangle, whereas this little frame piece doesn't. That's still not a problem. I'm going to use some of that leftover foam and just cut a small triangle and adhere it on top. That way I'll still be able to attach all of my die cut frames. Now, in order to cut out the acetate, you will need to purchase the outline dies. Those are not included in the kit. I love to have them on hand, and I use them for the background of all of my shakers. So I filled up this shaker with some of those little star shells and also some yellow diamonds. I'll add some liquid adhesive around the outside so I can attach the die cut frames. I like to do the bottom portion of the castle first, and then I can add the little triangle on the top. So I'll put my acrylic block on there, let it dry before I add the door and the windows. I'll pull out my embellishment wand again. This time for the door, I tucked it in underneath that frame. I'll add 3 of the windows. Decided to put the bottom 2 windows a little higher this time, just for some variety. And for the sentiment, I've already gone ahead and stamped this out. This is "Relax, You Deserve It." Stamped it on an oval die cut and then popped it up using some foam dimensional tape. Then I decided to add these teeny tiny flip-flop die cuts. These are included in Queen & Company's Summer Celebration Special Delivery Kit. They match perfectly with that pattern paper, so I thought it'd be fun to add a tiny little pair next to the sandcastle. Now, to finish off the card, I'm using an assortment of Queen & Company bling. This time I have some red pinwheels, some of the yellow ice flowers, and also I think it's the teal petite posies. And I needed to add a little extra decoration to the sandcastle. Decided just to stick with the ice flower and the jelly gems. I like the look of it. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. Aren't those flip-flop dies just adorable? I will add a link to the special celebration kit if you are interested. Now, moving on to the next set of cards, not using a card sketch this time. For the background, I have the orange striped paper, and then I added a scalloped rectangle die cut on top. Use some white pearlescent paper for that. I'm going to use 2 images. So I have both of the swimsuits. This time I won't be adding any shaker images. I'm just going to use the die cuts. So I still use the outline die to cut out that piece that goes behind, and then I cut out the frame to glue on top. You could just use the outline die cut, but I like that stitch detail on the frame. I'll do the same thing on the female swimsuit. And before I attach the swimsuits, I'm going to add the sentiment. I want to make sure I get the placement correct. And this sentiment is, "On your birthday, may the waves hit your feet and the sand be your seat." I used another Queen & Company foundation die for this larger sentiment banner. Use some of the solid orange, and then behind this banner I used the lighter orange paper, just that about a 1/2 inch strip to put behind, just for some little extra detail. I popped up that whole sentiment using some foam dimensional tape. I'm going to glue down both of the swimsuits. I'm not going to pop up either of them this time, so I'm just gluing them straight down. I'll add the little bow for the tie on the swim trunks. These are really tiny bows. I think if they were any bigger, it would look a little out of place. So I'll use a mini glue dot to attach that to the swim trunks. For the female swimsuit, I'm going to add a blue flower die cut, and then I'll put a green flower die cut next to the sentiment. Now to pull out all the fun bling, I'm going to use some of the green pinwheels and put it in the center of the flower on the swimsuit. Then I'll put an ice flower in the center of the green flower, and then just adding some, see, I have some orange bubbles and also some blue jelly gems. Overall, this is a very simple card design. I really wanted to find a way to add both of the swimsuits on one card. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. On the second card, I did make the swimsuit a shaker. So that used up the final swimsuit shaker piece that I had. Moving on to the next set of cards, this sketch is Mojo Monday sketch number 536. I love the bright and cheerful primary colors in this pattern paper. You could use these for school or teacher cards. Any number of card themes would be perfect since none of these patterns have any specific theme on them. I have some yellow chevron paper for the background, using some stripe paper and also some red polka dot paper behind will be a circle element later. I decided to layer this piece on two different colors. So I have some of the blue solids and then some red cardstock. For the circle image, I used some craft cardstock. I'll add some scrap pieces to the upper portion of this circle die cut where it goes over those striped and polka dot pieces. Then I'll add just a small piece on the lower portion. And I can adhere this circle die cut to my card, and that's where my image is going to be. This is another sketch that I'm not following exactly, but I am using it for the main inspiration. For the image, I'll be using the sand pail and shovel. Have it cut out of the solid blue and then the red shovel. I'm just going to assemble the pail first. And I'm always trying to decide where I want to put this shovel. I'm still going to tuck it behind that pail just a little bit. I'm going to pop up the pail using some thin foam squares. I'll make sure to get good coverage so there isn't any area that sags at all. Then I'll adhere it to my card, putting it just slightly off center. For the sentiment, I'm using Enjoy Your Day. Stamp this on a sentiment banner, and it's going to come out of the side of the pail. I'll add just a small piece of scrap cardstock on the right-hand side of that sentiment. And then after holding that sentiment piece up to my card, I realized I need to add one more scrap of cardstock. Keep everything nice and level. And some finishing touches, I decided to add a couple small banners to the upper right hand corner. I have one in blue and one in red, and both of these dies are included in one of Queen & Company's foundation die sets. In fact, almost every die I use in this video is by Queen & Company. So I will have links provided in the description box if you want to check out their foundation die sets. They are my favorite and I use them all the time. I thought it would be fun to add an image to the pail. I have two different yellow flowers in two different shades of yellow. I'll just glue those directly onto the pail and then add a small ice flower in the center. And then to finish off the card, I'm adding some red lollies. Kind of sad that finished off my pack. I also have some yellow iridescent bubbles and some blue petite posies. And then I did decide to add a couple blue jelly gems just for a little extra detail on the pail. So there is my finished card. I did make two using this sketch, although I didn't have enough of that same pattern paper. So I used some different pattern paper and also used the last of my pail shaker piece. At this point, I'm out of full sheets of pattern paper, but I still have plenty 2 and 3 inch wide strips. So I used a stitched rectangle die by Queen & Company, used several pattern papers and cut out an assortment. I have a piece of white cardstock. This is 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I covered it completely with ATG tape. Now I'm just going to layer all of these strips on top of each other, trying to alternate the patterns and colors. Now they do go off of the edge just a little bit. So I was trying to have them equal on the top and the bottom. So I just flipped over this panel using my scissors and trimming along the edge of that white cardstock. And there is my background panel. This is a great way to feature multiple pattern papers, especially when you're getting to the end of a paper pad. So I'll just layer this on some red cardstock. and then add this panel onto a card base. I'm using this scalloped rectangle die. Cut this out using some white pearlescent paper, and I'll just adhere this to the top center portion of the card. I did use a little bit of liquid adhesive just to make sure it was going to stay in place. I'll be adding the sun image to the card. I have the larger piece cut out of the solid yellow paper, and then for the smaller piece I used some of Queen & Company's yellow glitter foam. This is self-adhesive. It does have the piece you just pull off on the back, although I did still add a little bit of liquid adhesive where I adhered the two foam pieces together just to make sure they're not going to fall apart later. I've stamped out the sentiment "Enjoy your day" on this fun curved banner. Add a small little fishtail banner in the upper left hand corner. And now just to finish off the card, I'm using some red pinwheels, some blue frosties, and also some gold petite posies. These have a really lovely sparkle to them. So there is the finished card, and I did make 4 using this design. And for one of those cards, I used the last of my sun foam piece, so I can make one more shaker card. So now moving on to my final set of cards. At this point, I only have small scraps of pattern paper left over, but I still found a way that I could use those. I'm using the scalloped rectangle die cut and adhering that to some blue cardstock. I'll put my card front onto a card base before I start adding images or sentiments. I have 2 of the thin strips with the little stitching in the center, one out of that same blue cardstock, and then the smaller one out of some of the yellow paper. So I'll glue down the blue first, and then I'm going to attach the yellow right in the center. And this is just a little extra detail for behind the sentiment. So for the pattern paper, I'm using some of the leftover pieces of the swimsuit. This is actually the inside piece of the shaker, so it's a little bit smaller than that full shaker image. But it still looks like a swimsuit, so I thought it would be fun to use 3 different patterns and add them to a card. I'm going to pop up all of them using some foam tape. I already put those pieces on the back just to save on time. I attach the one in the center first, and then the 2 on the outside, trying to get nice even placement. I glued the sentiment right underneath the 3 swimsuits, and then I wanted to add a little extra detail to the swimsuits, so I'm using the bow die that's included in Queen & Company's original special delivery kit. So it has the bow and then the little strip going down. It was designed to go on top of the little present, but I decided to just cut off that bottom portion so that we could just have the tiny bow. I have 2 bows in 2 different shades of yellow, and I put them on the outside swimsuit straps, and then the red bow goes in the center of the striped swimsuit. Now finishing touches using some of the green pinwheels. Have some yellow iridescent goosebumps, yellow jelly gems, and also a green jelly gem. So there is my finished card, and I did have enough scraps so I could make 2 with those same pattern papers. Now here are all the leftover pattern paper scraps. Not a whole lot left, but I will still donate these to my daughter, and I'm sure she'll create some darling cards. I also still have 2 of the foam and acetate pieces. I have a surfboard and the swim trunks. I also wanted to show what I have left over from the 6x6 solids. So lots of little scraps and plenty of full sheets. These come in handy, and the colors do match with some of the other Queen & Company paper collections. In addition to the paper pad, I also used 4 sheets of 8.5 by 11 and 8 sheets of 12 by 12 solid colored cardstock. A total of 24 cards were made using Queen & Company's Beach Bound 6x6 paper pad and kit. I have provided links in the description box for the Beach Bound kit, along with the add-ons and other products I used in this video. If you've never tried one of Queen & Company's shaker kits before, I highly recommend them. They're so easy to use. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.